Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the third annual Saturday Splash, the online fall conference of the Minnesota Association of Library Friends. My name is Loretta Ellsworth. I'm a member of the Friends of the Heritage Library and on the program committee for MELF. I was delighted to hear from our program office manager, David, that 50% of this year's registrations come from first-time Saturday Splash attendees. Moreover, we have more than 40 of our state's 87 counties represented, truly putting the Minnesota Association of Library Friends. If you're newer to the fold, you may be wondering, why do we call it Saturday Splash? It's a name that serves two purposes. First, our agenda for this morning will include a splash of this and a splash of that. As the connective tissue, though, each of these segments is specifically for, by, and about Friends of the Library in Minnesota. It's not something we take for granted. Only a small handful of states can boast a Friends-specific gathering of this sort. That leads us to the second meaning behind the name. We fervently believe that good work done by Friends has a positive ripple effect on their library, and by extension, their community. Saturday Splash is MELF's best opportunity all year round to honor, inform, and amplify your exemplary work. With that said, let's overview what you can expect this morning. First off, our featured speaker, Kate DiCamillo, will grace us with a keynote to set the tone. We'll leave time afterwards for author Q&A. Many of you have submitted thoughtful questions ahead of time as part of your registration process. We'll begin with those, and as time permits, turn to questions you pitched today. Drop those in the chat box at the bottom of your screen whenever you think of them. Kate will stick around with us for our second segment, when we showcase the three phenomenal finalist projects in contention for MELF's annual Evie Nordley Award. She'll introduce each pre-recorded presentation and then announce the winner. If you've attended Saturday Splash in the past, you already know how we like to cap things off. We'll round out our morning together by spotlighting MELF's 2022 class of Stand Up for Standout Friends. Colleagues past and present have contributed photos and voiceover narration to a special video montage tribute honoring these 9 standout individuals. It's less than 15 minutes in length. It gives a representative glimpse of the many ways that Friends volunteers across Minnesota are a blessing to their libraries and communities. After a few last announcements, we'll have you out in time for lunch. You likely know Minnesota's own Kate DiCamillo as one of the most read and best loved children's authors of our time. But did you know that the 2-time Newbery Medal winner is also a friend of the library? It's true. Kate's relationship with and affinity for libraries began at an early age when she participated in the summer reading program in Clermont, Florida. As she told public libraries in a recent interview, I couldn't believe I was getting prizes for doing exactly what I wanted to be doing, which was reading. DiCamillo now uses her celebrity to champion the cause of libraries in a host of ways, serving as spokesperson for the nation's largest administrator of summer reading programs, collaborating with industry thought leaders like the American Library Association and Little Free Libraries, and speaking over the years at more public library venues than you can count. Each of our Stand Up for Standout Friends honorees today will receive a signed copy of Kate's latest book, The Beatrice Prophecy. Our 3 Evie Nordley finalist presenters will get the same token of thanks. If you'd like your own copy of The Beatrice Prophecy, see the chat section for a purchase link from our partnering bookseller, Red Balloon Bookshop. Okay, Kate, take it away.
Thank you, Loretta, and thank you, libraries and people who support libraries. So I'm going to talk about the Beatrice Prophecy and about the power of reading, but I'm going to start with my mom. In January of 2009, my 86-year-old mother broke her hip, was operated on for the broken hip, came out of the operation successfully, had a heart attack, and then went into major organ failure. It's just a matter of hours, a doctor told me. Hours like days, I said. Hours like hours, he said. Her system is shutting down. she won't regain consciousness. My brother was in Scotland when all of this happened. There was a direct flight that would get him to Minnesota in just under 24 hours. It was thousands of dollars. There was another, much cheaper flight that would get him there in 36 hours. The doctor said, it's just a matter of hours. I told my brother, you're not going to make it here in time either way. There's no point in going into debt for a plane ticket. Besides, she's not conscious. She won't even know that you're here. A nurse overheard my conversation with my brother. She came over to me after I'd hung up the phone and said, you should know that sometimes dying parents will make truly heroic efforts. They hold on so that they can see their kids again. Really? I said. I called my brother back. I told him what the nurse had said. Really? My brother said. We both agreed that our mother wasn't the type of person to delay dying for sentimental reasons. Pardon me. Neither one of us could conceive of her working to stay alive until my brother arrived. He booked the cheaper flight. My mother stayed alive for almost 2 more days. She waited for him. This is the power sometimes granted the dying to choose their moment of leaving. That quote is written in a notebook that I kept with me at the hospital. I don't know who said those words to me. Was it the same nurse who had told me that parents sometimes wait for their children? Was it a doctor, a stranger I had talked to in the hospital hallways? Did I read the words in a book or did I make them up myself? I don't know. All I know is that I wrote the words down. All I know is that my mother exercised the power that had been granted to her. My brother came directly from the airport to the hospital. He sat with my mother and held her hand and told her she looked beautiful because it would have mattered to her to look beautiful. My mother died with my brother sitting beside her bed. It was her last great magic trick, her final upending of our expectations. It was her contrarian self made at this final hour wonderfully, fully manifest. In June of that year, 6 months after my mother died, I went with a couple of writer friends to a cabin in Wisconsin. In a notebook, I wrote the opening lines of the story that I'm here to talk to you about, the story of a girl named Beatrice and a goat called Answelica. The story begins when a gentle monk named Brother Edic finds the lost and feverish Beatrice and says to her, "Whose child are you?" This question, "Whose child are you?" appeared several times in the notes I made on the story. When I got home from the cabin, I started on a rough draft of the first part of the tale of the girl, the goat, and the monk. It was at this point a story about the power of the written word and a story about remembering and forgetting, a story about grief and love. I did a second draft of the first part, some 50 pages, and then I stopped. I don't know why. I can find no record in any of my notebooks about my decision to put the story aside. All I know is that I printed up the pages of the rough draft and put them away. I returned to a book that I had begun earlier, a book about a squirrel who gets sucked up in a vacuum cleaner and who's transformed into a superhero. As I worked on the superhero squirrel book, I kept thinking, this story would make Betty laugh. Betty, my mother, Betty, who loved to laugh. Betty, who had been in possession of a vacuum cleaner that she had often touted as having near miraculous powers. I forgot entirely about the monk and the girl and the goat. And when I say I forgot, I mean I forgot. It was as if the story had never existed at all. In my 20s, when I was between jobs, I decided to take a train from Florida to Pennsylvania to visit my father. I was on the train for several days. A lot of interesting people sat next to me. One of them was an older gentleman who took his false teeth out of his mouth sometime after midnight. The train was dark and the man held his teeth in his hands and started to work cleaning them with a little pick, digging into crevices, working to extract tiny pieces of food. Sometimes a stray piece would come flying my way and the man would say, "Apologies, apologies, I do beg your pardon, but these things must be removed," he hummed as he worked. Much later in the trip, an entire family surrounded me, overflowing the seats and occupying, it seemed, the entire train. Young children, aunties, babies, grandmothers, teenagers. I was the one non-family member in their midst. They were happy together. They had brought food and they shared it with me. A mother gave me 2 pieces of fried chicken, and when I ate those 2 pieces quickly, gratefully, I was hungry. I had been existing on peanut butter and saltines. I was gifted with a 3rd piece. Later, after we ate, one of the older women turned to me and said, "Now, I don't remember. Whose child are you?" I shook my head. I couldn't think of how to answer her. It seemed like the most impossible question in the world to answer, and so I said nothing. The old woman took my hand. She squeezed it. "That's fine, baby," she said. "That's just fine." I was 26 years old. I wanted to be a writer. I had brought a notebook with me. It was spiral bound and filled with pages of empty, blue-lined paper. I took this notebook with me back to the dining car. I sat at a table with a cup of coffee. Most of the time, I looked out the window in a pensive, writerly way. Less frequently, I bent my head to the notebook and wrote. I couldn't believe how hard it was. I couldn't believe how the words fought me, how I fought the words, how this grand castle that I had built in my mind refused to take shape on the paper in front of me. It was terrifying. My last seatmate on the train was a woman my age, a graduate student. She was listening to Sting's album, Dream of the Blue Turtles, on her Walkman. She talked to me about graduate school. I told her that I was a writer. I can't remember the woman's name. She had blonde hair. She let me listen to Sting on her headphones. I could feel the music inside of me. I felt the train inside of me too, its purpose and momentum. I exist. I exist. That was the phrase that went through my head as Sting sang and the train thrummed. I exist. But also, at the same time, I doubted it. I doubted that I existed. "What are you writing now?" the graduate student asked me. "A novel," I said. "I'm making pretty good progress." I had written maybe 6 pages in the spiral bound notebook. My father's father was a shoemaker. He wanted my father to be a lawyer or a doctor. My father wanted to be a writer. He became an orthodontist. On the train to see my father with a notebook on the table in front of me, I thought about how my father had never become a writer. I thought about shoemakers, and I thought about shoemakers' elves, those small magical beings who visit while the desperate shoemaker sleeps. The elves work through the night, and in the morning, the shoemaker wakes and finds a beautiful pair of shoes waiting on his workbench. I thought about how much I would love to wake up in the morning and find the pages of my blue-lined notebook filled with a story. The magic of someone else doing the work for me, that is what I wished for. How do you do this? How do you turn words into a story? How does it happen without magic, without elves? That is what I asked myself on the train from Florida to Pennsylvania. I couldn't think of what the answer might be. In the words of the Irish novelist Neil Williams, I could not escape the feeling that folded against my back were wings that had failed to open. When I got off the train in Pennsylvania, I showed my father the notebook. I said, "I'm writing a novel." He said, "Good for you." I said, "It's so hard. I didn't think it would be this hard." He said, "If you want to do something easy, go and do something else. Go work in a factory and screw toothpaste caps onto toothpaste tubes." Later, much later, years after this visit, when I sent my father a finished story, he wrote me a letter that said, "You don't think this is significant, do you?" In an interview in the Paris Review, The novelist Jeanette Winterson says about writing, the challenge is to continue to do it. Also, to remember what I'm here for, no matter how many voices tell me I'm really here for other things, or really here for nothing at all. She then goes on to say that there's a fairy story about the prince and the black stones. On top of a crystal mountain is a princess, i.e., the thing of highest worth, the thing desired. The prince, the hero, the questing self, wants to get to the princess, the thing of highest worth. He starts to climb the mountain, which is crystal and therefore extremely slippery and difficult. On the way, he does all right for a bit. Then these black stones in his path start to speak and they say, "You're a fool. Why are you going up this mountain? You'll never get to the top. In any case, when you get to the top, it won't be worth it. There's nothing there, or you're going to die of thirst. You're going to die of hunger." This continues all the way up. He becomes more and more depressed and he thinks, "I'll never, never get to the top." Then, of course, eventually the hero does get to the top and frees the princess. He looks back and realizes that the black stones were the souls of all the people who had failed before and therefore who didn't want anyone else to succeed. That's a useful story if you're a writer, because the way is full of black stones. All you know is that there's this thing of highest value, of great worth, that you want to keep trying to achieve every time up the slippery rock with no sense of being able to get there. In the end, Winterson says, you simply have to stuff your ears and keep climbing. Those wings that Neil Williams speaks of so poignantly, those wings folded against our backs that have failed to open. It is up to us to open them, which is not to say that others can't help us in the unfolding. They can, they do. When I was very young, I felt a different pair of wings folded against my back. I felt the weight of them. I felt their promise of freedom and power. I was desperate for those wings to open. I was 7 years old. I wanted to learn to read. I knew even then that what I needed was words, the words that led to the stories. In first grade in 1971 at Claremont Elementary in Claremont, Florida, we were taught to read with phonics. I could not, for whatever reason, make any sense out of phonics. Every day I came home from school, wretched, desperate. This thing I wanted to read on my own was right before me, but yet it was receding. I told my mother that I didn't understand what was going on. I told her that the letters with the shapes on top of them made no sense to me at all. I want to read, I wailed, and I don't understand. And my mother, with that propensity always for doing what was contradictory, different, said, "Well, for the love of Pete, work around it then. You're smart. You've got a good memory. Just memorize the words. I'll help you." She made me flashcards, a very thick stack of flashcards, each printed with a single word. She would hold up the word, tell me what it was, and I would repeat it, look at it, memorize it. Every day after school, she and I worked together on the flashcards. Each word I learned felt like a key in my hand. I could feel its hard edges, its particular pattern. I knew that it would unlock something, everything, stories, lighted rooms, the world. I memorized the words my mother held up to me. In this book that I'm here to talk to you about today, in the story of Beatrice and the goat and the monk, it is against the law for females to read and write, to learn to read and write. But Beatrice can read and write. Her mother, her contrary, fierce, brave mother, has assured that she can, has insisted that she be taught. In Beatrice's world, it is against the law for girls to read and write, but there is also this: no one can read. The common person is not taught their letters. It is only men of God and men in power who are literate. When Beatrice becomes friends with a boy named Jack Dory, she is dismayed to find that he does not know how to read. she sets out to teach him. I'm reading now from the book. Each letter has a shape, Beatrice said to Jack Dory. And each letter has a sound. And you put these shapes and sounds together and they become words. Do you understand? He said to her. His heart was beating fast. He did not know. He had not understood how much he wanted it, to know the secret of letters and sounds and words, but his heart, pounding against his rib cage, was telling him. There are 26 letters in all, she said. You will learn each of them, and once you know them, you can mix them as you will, and then use them to form the words of the world and the things of the world. You can write of everything, what is and what was and what might yet be. Jack Dory nodded. The inside of Cannock's tree was snug. There was the smell of beeswax burning and also, of course, the smell of goat. The bee buzzed around Jack Dory's head. Granny Bibspeak beside him, saying, learn it, my beloved, learn it all. Light of my heart, river of my soul. He watched the letters appear one by one beneath her hand. And he felt as if each letter were a door pushed open inside of him, a door that led to a lighted room. Beatrice leads Jack Dory into the lighted room, just as my mother led me. My father was an excellent photographer. For a time when I was very young, before he left the family, my father was obsessed with taking photographs. He bought an expensive camera. He took pictures of my brother, my mother, me. He turned the images into slides. He gave slideshows. We would all sit together and stare at a blank wall, waiting while the slide projector fan made a humming, busy noise. First, there came a white square on the wall, empty, perfect, bright. And then there was the click of the carousel advancing and the ka-chunk of the slide falling into place. The white square on the wall became a blur of color. My father would focus. The machine made the sound of a tiny engine accelerating, decelerating, accelerating again. And then suddenly, there we were, my mother, me, my brother, French Creek, Sanibel Island, a river, an ocean, my mother's face, my brother's face, my face, the world, us. All those beautiful images, all that light. The first time I finished a story, after writing and rewriting and rewriting, working and working to bring the image into focus, I thought, I know this feeling. It was as if I'd been sitting in a darkened room and a square of light had been projected onto the wall. It was as if all the writing and rewriting had been the work of focusing a slide, as if finally something beautiful had been captured. Because I did, in the end, figure out a way to unfold the wings on my back. I learned to do it without the magic of the shoemaker's elves. I learned to do it without my father's approval. I learned to do it by doing it, by stuffing my ears and climbing, by writing draft after draft after draft, working to find the beauty and the light in the words. It is summertime, late summer, August. The cicadas are singing and the angle of the light has changed. And I have set to work on the dreaded, long delayed task of cleaning the closet in my office. It is 2018. My mother has been dead for 8 years. I've been a writer for 20 years. And in those 20 years, I've written lots of stories. I've done many, many rewrites. The closet in my office is filled with pile upon pile of papers, rough drafts, notes on legal pads, notes on scraps of paper. Look, another rough draft, and here's another one, more notes, more terrible rough drafts. Some rough drafts that became second and third drafts and fourth and fifth ones, and ultimately became stories that worked. It's all here, and it's slow going. At the very bottom of the last pile of papers, I find a story, or the beginning of a story. It's the story of a girl and a goat and a monk. It's the story of a girl who should not be able to read, but can read. I wrote it, but it has been so long since I've seen it or thought about it that it's as if I haven't written it. In the story, Beatrice has forgotten who she is. She can't remember anything, but she dreams of who she was and what has happened to her. In one recurring dream, there's a seahorse falling through the air. The seahorse twists and turns, lit, golden, alive with some meaning that Beatrice cannot fathom, that she does not want to remember. I'm reading now from the Beatrice prophecy. She dreamed. The tutor held something in his hand, curled in his fist. "It is for Beatrice," he said. "What is it?" shouted her brothers. "Let us see, let us see." "Tap my hand," the tutor told her. She touched his fingers, and he uncurled them slowly to reveal a strange creature. "What is it?" she said. "A seahorse," he said, "a horse of the sea." "Does it live?" she asked. "It is dead," the tutor answered her. She took the seahorse from his hand. It was light, so light that it felt as if she were holding someone else's dream cupped in her hand. She admired the seahorse's curled tail, considered his long nose. She turned him over and saw that he had only one eye. "Is he made so?" she asked, "with only one eye?" "No," said the tutor. "Some trauma happened, I suppose." "It's broken," shouted Aesop. "I want to hold it," said Rowan. "In a moment," said Beatrice. Rowan jostled her elbow and the seahorse fell from her hand. This happened slowly, so slowly that it seemed as if the seahorse floated through the air, twisting and turning, his one eye appearing and then disappearing, winking at her. And then there came a flash of light. A soldier burst into the hall. Seahorse never reached the ground. The dream ended before he could complete his fall, and then it began again. The tutor's closed fist, the tutor's long fingers uncurling to reveal the creature, his voice saying, "A seahorse, a horse of the sea." Then came the word "dead," and the lightness, the weightlessness of the seahorse in her hand, the creature falling and falling, the soldier bursting in. The dream repeated. It repeated and never changed. The seahorse, it seemed, would never do anything but fall. Beatrice, caught in her fever, captured by her dream, turned from side to side, working to escape. In the 8 years since I had seen the story, in the 8 years since I had written it and put it away, I would sometimes remember that seahorse falling. I would think, where did I read that story of a seahorse falling? Or did I dream it? I don't know. I can't remember. In our brains, there is a small curved formation responsible for the creation of memories. It's called the hippocampus. It's seahorse shaped. Hippocampus is Latin for seahorse. Did I know this when I wrote the story? I don't think so. Maybe it's possible. All I'm certain of is that I sat that August afternoon on the floor of my office in a patch of light, listening to the cicadas sing, and I felt like the cicadas were inside of me. My whole body thrummed. I knew I had found something. I had found a story worth telling, the story I remembered, the story I didn't remember at all, a story buried not only in the closet, but also deep inside of me. Here is a picture my father could have taken, but did not. Here is a photograph that he could have made into a slide, one that would have started as a patch of color on the wall and then slowly come into focus. It is a memory that I've forgotten and not forgotten. Something curled in the seahorse of my brain. I'm young. I'm in the Florida room with my mother. It's autumn. I know this by the slant of light on the floor. I'm sitting with a book spread out before me. It is Pinocchio, a lavishly illustrated Golden Books edition. The art is wonderful, richly colored, deeply imagined. The book is large, I'm laying down, propped up on my elbows. The carpet is warm beneath me. I'm reading aloud to my mother. She is sitting at the glass top table, reading the newspaper, listening to me and not listening to me, both things at the same time. The story of Pinocchio is deep and rich and strange. It's like a dream. And the words are complicated and glorious. And as I read them aloud, I can feel them clicking into place inside of me. I know them. I know them all. That's good, Kate, my mother says at one point, looking up from the newspaper. You're a good reader. My mother does not give idle compliments. Therefore, I am a good reader. Therefore, there are wings on my back, and they are no longer folded. They have unfurled. When I published my first book, my father said to my brother, there's nothing much to it, really. It's not significant. It's not impressive at all. That's what he said. For some reason, my father wanted to destroy that part of me, the part of me that thinks and that tells stories, the part of me that writes. In the Beatrice prophecy, Beatrice, because she can read and write, is in great danger. The king's men are searching for her. The counselors of the king wants to destroy her. When Beatrice remembers who she is, she remembers too a moment in the tower room with her mother. I'm reading again from the book. Her mother was at the spinning wheel, and Beatrice was at her feet, bent over the tutor's book about the king who had been turned into a wolf. She was reading the story to her mother, and her mother was nodding, smiling, spinning. The small room was filled with light. It is very good, Beatrice, said her mother. It is a good story, and you read it wonderfully well. But remember, if someone outside of this house were ever to ask you if you could read or write, you must say that you cannot. You must never admit to what you can do. There may well come a day when things will be different and you can claim your powers. But for now, we must be careful. Do you understand? Yes, Beatrice said, although she had not truly understood. But her mother had understood. Her mother had known. Whose child are you? Brother Edic says to Beatrice in the first draft of the many drafts of this story. And what Brother Edic says to Beatrice in the final draft that becomes a book is this. Who are your people? Who are your people? Brother Edic asked. They will want to know that you are alive. They will want you home. Whose child are you? The woman said to me on the train. I could not then think how to answer her. I will answer her now. I am the child of a contrary woman. I am the child of a woman who showed me a way around, through, a woman who helped me to memorize the words of the world one by one. I am my mother's child, and this book is dedicated to her. That's the speech. I wonder what the questions are.
Wow. Wow, that was so powerful and just wonderful.
Can I say something, Loretta? Like, you know, I wish that I had put this in there. It's like I talk about it a lot in different places, but, you know, not only did my mother give me that gift of teaching me how to read, but she literally drove like half the neighborhood to the library, the public library, twice a week. We all loaded into the station wagon. And I think about that now because so many kids don't have somebody who will get them there. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm ready. I'm ready to do
well, you know, I just want to say, you know, I've read all your books, and one thing that you were talking about, and I think to me, it always seems like a theme in all of your books, is the beauty and light of words.
Yeah.
And it just feels like that's, you know, in all of the books, I feel that. And want to thank you for that. And we do have some really good questions too. Some that have just popped up recently on the chat and some that we already have. The first one is related to the Beatrice prophecy, and it's two parts. She says, can you tell us how you got linked with Sophie Blackall to illustrate it? And did you have any say in like the medievally type of illustrations, or was that all her?
Yeah, so typically the way it works, and this is, I know that you know this, Loretta, but generally, if a book is illustrated that you have written, you, as the writer, do not have any interactions with the person who is doing the artwork at all. You are purposely kept separate. And also, what I have in my contract, and I think it's what most writers have, is what's called rights of refusal as far as who's going to do the work. So you can make a big stink and say, no, I don't want this person. But generally, the publisher working with the design team, the editor, they're the ones who choose who does the illustrations, not me. And I've learned, because Candlewick does such beautiful books, to trust them in that process. But when I turned in this book, I said to my agent, it would be a dream of epic proportions if Sophie Blackall did the art for this. And so that got passed on to Candlewick, and happily they like the idea. But then what happens is that you have to ask Sophie if she wants to do it, and then you have to, if there's time in Sophie's schedule for her to do it. And so it was a miraculous thing when she agreed to do it. And then technically, again, even though I know Sophie a little bit, we didn't get to talk about how she was going to do it or what she was going to do. I just saw the sketches as Sophie came in, as she turned them in. And I didn't say when or how, because there's a line at the end of this book that says, this all happened long ago, or maybe has yet to happen. So it is not technically in any time period. We don't know when it is. But Sophie, working with Chris Paul, decided on this kind of medieval look with a William Morris background, kind of with the design elements. And I just thought it was glorious what she did. And I cannot imagine this book without her art. So it's been just a real gift.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah, it was gorgeous. Somebody asked, we received Beatrice books for our media center, thanks to MILF, and thank you for your generosity to school libraries. We wanted to point that out. Did you have any say in the production of your audiobooks and the choice of voice cast? She's a big fan of those.
Oh, yes. So what happens with when they record an audiobook is that they generally come to me and say, here are the voices that we're thinking of. Which one do you prefer? And sometimes I like say, oh, it's kind of a little bit like when somebody's doing the artwork for the book, I speak up sometimes. And I felt with Beatrice that like it really needed a female voice. And so Tenti, who is the daughter of Judi Dench, just seemed absolutely perfect for this audiobook. And audiobooks are just it's so amazing to me that you can, it's like go to your library, check out the audiobook, because I hear from so many families who take them on, long trips in the car. And it's just like, what a gift it is to hear a story all together when you're all in the car. I mean, the magic of that, I think it's profound. So
it is. Another person said, I love the feminist undertones in the Beatrice prophecy, particularly as seen in Answelica and Beatrice. Was this something you intended going into the writing of it?
Yeah, absolutely not. And it was like, and I never know what I'm doing. And then it was like, I could start to see it out of the corner of my eye. And, kind of like, this is true with all the thematic elements for me. It's like I became aware, like by the time I was like maybe in like the next to last draft of it, it's like, oh, this is going on. There are all these feminist elements, but I never, it's the same as I didn't fully understand how much this book had to do with my mother until I was done with it and started to think about and the fact that my father wanted to suppress that part of me, the thinking part of me, the writing part of me, and none of that was I aware of, but it all ends up in the book and makes the, you know, it connects to the themes that are unwittingly there. I tell this story quite a bit, but I'll tell it very quickly now that I remember the very first time I went and did a school visit. It was when my first book had been published. It was Because of Winn-Dixie. I was so excited to do a school visit. I stood in front of this fourth grade classroom, and the kids were all looking at me, and the teacher said, here's the person who wrote the book, and now we're going to talk about the themes in this book. And I thought, oh no. I mean, I could feel like literally like a trickle of sweat go down the side of my body, because I thought, what are the themes? I have no idea what the themes are. And mercifully, the kids working with the teacher, they shouted out the themes. She wrote them down on the board, and then I went out to the car and I memorized them, and so I could use them for the next school visit. And that's when I became aware about that thing where you're kind of writing behind your own back a lot of the time, and you don't know what's going on. Okay, all right, I'll be quiet now, Retta.
Well, that's a good segue actually to the next question.
Oh, good.
Which of your works of fiction feels most autobiographical? Or if it's easier to answer, which books feels most personal? And
yeah, every book feels super personal, and I can find myself in virtually every character in every book. But the first time I was really aware of kind of like just putting myself directly on the page was with a book called Raymie Nightingale, which is the story of a girl named Raymie Clark whose father leaves the family, you know, I had been telling the story of missing parents for a long time, and my father left when I was young, but I was looking at it indirectly. And in that book, I looked at it directly and really kind of revealed myself. And also really that Raymie was so much the kid that I was when I was growing up, that kind of watchful, worried, hopeful kind of kid. And so that's probably the most that I've, you know, but every book is personal. And then like unwittingly, you know, the Beatrice Prophecy is probably one of the most personal books that I've written. So.
okay, that's good. If Beatrice Prophecy sees a screen adaptation, which we all hope it does, who would be your dream casting for Beatrice, Jack Dory, and Edic? She said, I just watched Flora and Ulysses, and it can actually picture Matilda Lawler as Beatrice.
Oh, it's so funny as I'm listening to the question. It's like Matilda will be too old, and Matilda is my number one choice. I mean, Matilda is unbelievable that she has, it's so much gravitas and certainty. Yeah, so that, yeah, I and who knows by the time, you know, this gets, I mean, I believe it will happen, that it will get turned into a movie, but I don't know who the child actors will be by then. But yeah, Matilda would have been my first choice. But it's fun to think about who would be Brother Edic. Patrick Stewart. Yeah. But you know, it's fun to play those games in your head. Yeah,
it is. Another one wants to know, have you discovered that you have any famous fans, folks who admire your work that you're floored that knows your name?
Wow. That makes me kind of like jumpy to even consider. You know, I mean, it's happened a couple times, but probably the most moving time for me was when I was on an airplane. This is a long time ago. And it wasn't somebody famous. It was just the boy sitting next to me in the middle seat. He was reading Because of Winn-Dixie.
Mm.
And that to me felt like the biggest thrill imaginable. And I wrestled with myself as whether I should say something or not. And I did finally tell him. I was like, I wrote that book. And this is what he said to me, this self-possessed 10 or 11-year-old. No, you didn't. I said, what? He said, no, that can't be. And then I like went so far as to show him my driver's license, but my driver's license like has my full name on it, which is Katrina as opposed to Kate. So he never did believe me. But there was something just so thrilling about this child just out in the world holding and reading this book that I had written that just moved me so much. So,
yeah. So what do you find to be the most difficult and most rewarding aspects of your career as a writer?
The word career is just always amazing to think about. I mean, I just because there is still a part of me that I seriously like cannot believe it's all happened. Like when I started writing, I was working in a book warehouse in downtown Minneapolis called the Bookman, and I was picking books, filling orders, and it gave me a really good idea for what to expect when you published a novel, which was absolutely nothing what happened. So there's part of me that still can't believe that what has happened to me has happened. So the hardest things and the best things, the hardest thing, I guess, is probably the doubt, because it never goes away. It's like it's always that thing of can I do this? Can I make this story work? Am I doing it right? Is it, does it matter? That never goes away. And then the best thing is, a kid writing a letter saying, I hated to read, and I read this book, and now I love to read. It never fails to move me. It's such a privilege to do this and to be a part of the magic that ushered me into this world. Those books that held me are now hopefully holding other kids, and it's I never get over the gift of that.
Do you ever worry that you'll run out of story ideas yourself, or you just have a fountain of ideas that are always there to draw?
I've learned to trust the universe, and it's actually a question that kids will ask a lot. Are you gonna run out of ideas? And I always say to them, have you been on any method of public transportation lately? Because if you get on a bus with a notebook in your hand and you really sit there and watch people and listen to them and be with them, you realize that there are more stories in the world than there will ever be time to tell. So yeah.
What are some of what authors are you reading yourself right now?
I just finished a great book called The Lucky Ones, and it's a middle grade novel by, her name is Linda, and then there's a middle name Jackson. I can't remember the middle name, but she'll forgive me for that. But it was fantastic. Takes place in Mississippi in the 1960s, and it's just it was really thought-provoking and deeply moving, and I loved it. And the picture book that I cannot get over these days is by our friend Sophie Blackle, Farmhouse. So if y'all haven't seen that book, it is a wonder of, it's about a farmhouse and the 12 kids that grew up in it, and it will make you want to write a book. It will make you want to share the book with somebody else, or tell the story of what it was like for your grandparents, or, it is just a marvel. And then for me as an adult, what am I reading? I've got a wonderful galley of a book called The Sun Walks Down. So I don't think it's out yet, but I recommend it wholeheartedly. When you see it come up, The Sun Walks Down, Fiona something. Yeah.
And someone wants to know, do you work on one project at a time or tend to jump around?
Yeah, I love that question because it gets to process, and which is always fascinating to me. And because when I finally started writing, I found that what worked for me was to move slowly. And so I do like 2 pages a day. And so I will do multiple drafts of the thing. So I'll, like, if I have a shorter project, I'll take it all the way through the first or second draft. I'll put it aside, let it sit for what I think is a minimum of 2 weeks. I try to leave it alone for that long. And in the meantime, I'll pick up another thing that is in second draft or third draft or fourth draft and take it up another draft. So I don't work on them within the same time period, but I have lots of projects going at the same time. I just return to them kind of in a pattern. And, that's great because, Loretta, I know that you know this too. It's just like the good thing about moving from project to project is there's always that point where you think this is never going to work with whatever you're working on. And it's like you take it as far as you can, you put it away. And then when you come back to it, it makes, you think, oh yeah, okay, I can work with this and this is what I'll do. You see it more clearly because of the time away from it.
Right, fresh eyes. What do you think of virtual versus in-person events now that you've done both of those?
Yeah, not a lot of in-person events lately, but I was surprised when the world shut down and we started doing the virtual things. What kind of amazed me was that you could still have that feeling, even though I couldn't see the people that I was talking to, I could still feel connected to them through, like just reading to them and through doing Q&A. And so I've been amazed that I can still feel that connection, because that's what I loved so much about being in front of people and talking with people at book signings and
Right.
doing lectures and events, was just that you get that feeling of community, and I'm amazed that that can still happen here. And I don't know if y'all have felt it. I felt it today. I felt y'all listening to me, and it matters.
So I know a lot of people, a lot of writers during the pandemic, their writing habits changed. Did your writing habits change at all during the pandemic, or how did it affect you?
Yeah, in the old days, what my life was a good portion of it was travel and promotion. And, I only wrote when I was at home. And so all of a sudden here I was at home all the time. So I wrote more than I had in a long time. And I also, I added more sessions than I would normally do. And I was so grateful that I could write, because it was like a centering thing. And how we all felt. It was utter panic and despair, and you're worried. And to be able to anchor myself with a story was just a real gift.
Yeah, it seems like it might be a good distraction.
Right.
And everything that was going
and
on.
again, even it's like talk about virtual. It is virtual when I'm doing that, because it's so long before it goes into people's hands, but yet you feel connected when you're telling a story. So
someone wants to know, how did the idea for Minnesota opera treatment of Edward Tulane come about? It feels like such an unexpected but not unwelcome pairing.
Right, a rabbit opera, it's not what
Right.
comes to mind for everybody right away. And the funny thing about that is that I'm not given to grandiose thoughts, but I remember when Edward Tulane was published, and I was with an old professor of mine from the University of Florida. I met up with him in Chicago, and he was talking about he said he was talking about Edward, and he said, it's just so many big emotions. He said, it's kind of operatic. And I said, I've just kind of always had this like feeling that maybe it could be turned into an opera. And then we both laughed. And yet it happened. And
Wow.
and it's just like, so the Minnesota Opera came to contacted my agent and said, we want to do this. And so it's going to be a thrilling I haven't seen a dress rehearsal, but I've gone and seen the costumes and stage settings, and it's just going to be, forgive me, miraculous. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone else wants to know, do you have a favorite band or playlist you listen to while writing?
Ooh, that's another question that I love that doesn't get asked a lot. Yeah, what I generally do is I find a piece of music that oh, that's it, that's what I need to listen to. And then every time I sit down to write a particular story or a particular novel, I play that again and again and again. Like we were just talking about Edward Tulane, that got written to Rachmaninoff's vocalese being played over and over and over again. And that's generally the way it is. I find something, a piece of music that ushers me into the story, kind of.
And Dawn would like to know what you're working on now, if you're in a position to share that.
Yeah, well, that takes us back to the pandemic. So part of, what I was working on, the first of those will come out. It's a trilogy of fairy tales, fairy tale novellas, kind of, and the first will come out next year. And I'm also working on a novel. I just finished rewrites of a novel, and I think I've got an idea for another novel. So yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we'll
Look
see.
forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yes. Did you get to do anything special for the recent anniversary of Winn-Dixie?
Oh yeah, that was great because I got to I have become friends with Ann Patchett, who is a wonderful writer of books for adults. And Ann did an introduction to the 20th anniversary edition, and so that was a great thing. And it's still like that whole thing of it being 20 years old, when now it's 22 years old, just still there's that element of disbelief for me. So it's just like 20 years, and the thing that really puts it into place, and it's just like it's happening more and more, is like when I do interviews, and if it's somebody who's like young and starting out, they will say to me, I read this book, I read Winn-Dixie when I was a kid, and I remember my teacher reading it in 3rd grade. I remember my librarian reading it to me when and after school stuff. And it's just like, it's so amazing to me to think that of these adults who are now out there running the world, and they've read Winn-Dixie. So
well, that is amazing. I think it's time to
make me be quiet. Can I say thank you to everybody who's a friend of the library, and because that means that what you are is a friend of the kids who need those books, and the kids who need the stories in those books. That's basically what you're doing, is you're making sure that kids like the kid I was can go out into the world and be who they're supposed to be. So thank you for.
Oh, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I do want to mention that Kate's speaking today. She did it as we were to buy copies of books to distribute to kids in libraries, and so we really thank you for that. For being so generous. And
thank you for doing that. Thank you. And I'm just deeply appreciative. So Loretta, you did a good job.
You did great. Thank you so much. Bye, Kate.
All right, bye.
We'll now continue the second half of our morning. Kate will do us the additional honor of setting the stage for MELF's flagship award.
We'll turn our attention to the Evie Nordley Award for Best Project by Friends of the Library. This is MELF's longest running recognition program and one that routinely garners interest from national groups like the Public Library Association and the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. MELF's board and staff members often get asked, who was Evie Nordley? In truth, hers is a career that is hard to do justice with a capsule description. A lifelong and trailblazing advocate for public libraries, Nordley co-founded the Minnesota Association of Library Friends in the late 1970s, and on the national scene was a beloved director of Friends of Libraries USA. For more than 20 years, Nordley pushed Friends to step out of their comfort zone and explore new ways to better their community. She practiced what she preached too. Under the auspices of the Minnesota Humanities Commission, Nordley brought to life a hugely popular Minnesota Chautauqua, powered by grassroots friends groups from all across Minnesota. After Nordley's passing in 1997, MELF created the Evie Nordley Award to recognize the commitment to friends and appetite for replicable innovation that she exemplified. We're about to hear from this year's 3 finalist groups, Ramsey County, Faribault, and Grand Rapids. I hope that listening leaves you all energized and inspired to do great things in your community. First up is Ramsey County. Valentine's Day falls squarely in the middle of National Library Lovers Month. That's a happy coincidence that the Friends of Ramsey County Libraries couldn't help but notice. Late last year, the Friends Board began brainstorming ways to capitalize on this too perfect opportunity by learning why residents use and value their local library. This resulted in Love Your Library, a community feedback campaign that far exceeded the organizers' modest expectations. Using less than $400 in supplies and graphic design assistance, the Friends collected well over 400 heartwarming notes and impactful stories from library lovers of all ages and backgrounds. Ann Trapnell, past president of the Ramsey County Friends of the Library, is here to tell us more about Love Your Library.
Thank you, Kate. It's great to be here today. I'm Ann Trapnell, the past president of the Ramsey County Library Friends. And I just want to say a really big thank you to MELF, not only for the honor of being selected, but also for giving us all this opportunity to share the new things we're trying with each other, because it really helps to have fresh ideas. So I really appreciate that. So just to get started here, I'm going to take you all back, and I know no one wants to go there, to 2020. We all went through it, the doldrums that came from the long slog of the first 12 to even 18 months of the COVID pandemic. Zoom fatigue, isolation, new normals, you know the buzzwords and the feelings. We all experienced the changes to typical life together. And while Ramsey County Library Friends are all passionate, caring, and dedicated to our library, the connection and interaction with each other was starting to feel a little bit flat. So conversations began with the Ramsey County Library staff and board. How do we better engage with our volunteers and our members? And taking the idea one step further, how can we engage our larger patron community with the hopes of introducing them to the Ramsey County Library Friends? When this conversation began, our purpose was threefold: engage with our community and re-energize feelings of connectedness and interaction. We also wanted to continue to increase the awareness of the Friends organization And we wanted to start building a story and quote bank, something we could use for future advocacy work, for fundraising, for friend raising, anything we could do to use those stories to best support the Ramsey County Library with our work. We started the conversation about what can we do to accomplish these goals in late 2021. And by early 22, we had agreed on the concept and decided that February, with Valentine's Day beckoning, would be a great time to launch this campaign. After many discussions among friends, staff, and committees, we talked to members, we talked to volunteers, we talked to library staff. An idea was born. In a remarkably short time frame, we embarked on a journey, inviting friends, members, and library patrons to share their own stories about why they love their library. We used graphics to play off our logo colors to increase the awareness of the Friends organization. We created an online entry option to be used with the URL that you can see on the screen there. And we printed signs, assembled response boxes, designed and printed entry forms, and even decided to use a Visa gift card and some of our used bookstore coupons as incentives to participate. Prize recipients were decided by a drawing of all participants. This was not a writing contest, again, to eliminate barriers to participation. This was a drawing. In a very short time frame and with minimal cost, we launched the Love Your Library campaign across all 7 Ramsey County Library branches. This was done in partnership with the library director, branch managers, and other Ramsey County Library staff. All of this started before Valentine's Day, so we had a really good jump on that Love Your Library theme throughout the whole month of February. We had never tried to do anything like this, so we really didn't know what to expect in terms of responses. But in pretty short order, folks proved they truly do love their library. The quotes and stories poured in from all 7 branches and online. We were overwhelmed to receive well over 400 submissions from library lovers of all ages and backgrounds, with many very heartwarming and impactful stories. You can see here some boards that we put together to use at library board meetings and at Friends board meetings to share with some of the folks doing a lot of the heavy lifting at the library what people thought. Right now, we have the great problem of trying to figure out how to process and catalog all of these stories so that we can continue to use them for advocacy, fundraising, and friend raising, as I mentioned earlier. This campaign provided many benefits. In addition to the warm fuzzies it provided, we absolutely accomplished all of our goals. We engaged with our members, we engaged with library staff and patrons from the larger community that we had never met before. We raised awareness of our organization and saw an increase in followers on social media, and we collected more stories and quotes than we ever expected. Once the dust had settled, we spotlighted several stories and quotes throughout the month of April. Since this is the time of National Library Week and all of the wonderful events that go with it, we felt it would be a great time to share the heartwarming essays and thoughts and quotes with our membership and with the greater community. So we did this via email to our members. We have an email newsletter type of contact, and then also through social media to reach the public and the larger community. Who doesn't love a feel-good story any day of the year? Whether it's the tear-inducing story of a beloved husband and father surrounded by family in his last moments of life, the inspiration provided by a Ramsey County Correctional Facility inmate, or the joyful and heartwarming words of a young immigrant student, the personal narratives shared by our library lovers have validated the many reasons that I personally have for becoming a library friend. I hope these quotes and stories inspire our Ramsey County Library staff and board, And I hope they inspire our friends, staff, board, volunteers, and members. And I hope these stories reach and engage a whole new group of library friends within our community. I encourage all of you to visit rclfriends.org to read some of the complete stories for yourselves. They really are moving. And thank you again to Mouth for both this honor and this wonderful opportunity to share new ideas with other library friends from around the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Anne. Next up, we have a first-time Evie Nordley contender, Friends of the Buckham Memorial Library. Buckham Memorial Library in Faribault enjoys a long, strong track record for public-private partnerships. It stretches back to 1930 when area resident Anna Buckman funded the original construction in memory of her late husband. That largesse and commitment to the community are alive and well today through the Friends of the Buckham Memorial Library. Over the past decade, library staff and other stakeholders have puzzled over how the library can better take advantage of its prime real estate at the head of busy Division Street. The Friends recently spearheaded and bankrolled a community coalition tasked with shaping a shared vision for a versatile public plaza outside the downtown library. Board member Stephanie Tywater Christensen is going to fill us in on the design and construction phases and leave us with a taste of what's next for Faribault's historic library.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Tywater Christensen, and I am currently the president of the Friends of Buckham Memorial Library. So the Friends of Buckham Memorial Library of Faribault, Minnesota is proud to share our story about the Plaza project. Our board members and our library community are pleased and honored to be considered for this award because it recognizes the commitment to our library and our passion for making this space a welcome and supportive place for everyone in the community. A library is a focal point, a sacred place to a community, and its sacredness is its accessibility, its publicness. It's everybody's place. This quote from Ursula K. Le Guin captures the thinking of the Faribault Friends Group as members contemplated ways to contribute to the library's mission. Arising from a strategic planning session 3 years prior, the board determined that the best contribution would be to facilitate the welcoming and inclusive spirit of the library. So from dream to reality, for more than 10 years, the Friends Board has contemplated how to move out of its comfort zone of merely funding traditional programming and into an innovative contribution to the library. There was a sense that combining the value of traditional programming with the recognized benefits of time spent in the out of doors would accomplish that goal. During the early years, our group sought bids for vague notions of an outdoor space only to receive not one single bid. As the years passed, the notion of a space in the outdoors germinated. Aided by a generous bequest, the board committed to doing something, but what? Attention focused on the current plaza area, as you can see on the screen. It's a space that was empty and difficult to access, but a place to begin. At the same time, our city was working with an architectural firm on several projects. So in combination with the bequest, this became an opportunity to move forward and develop plans for that space. Because the space was intended to be inclusive and welcoming, we turned to the community for help. Using city partnerships, local media coverage, and communication with patrons, the board sought input on the project. The effort culminated in an outdoor event in August 2019 to collect ideas and advice appropriate for the project itself. The Friends hosted the event, which garnered contributions and a festive gathering with games, snacks, and robust conversations. The ideas from this session formed the basis for ongoing plans. As we sought input, we had key goals in mind for what we wanted the space to include. These goals included create a central focal point for the library, create a welcoming gathering space for everyone in the community, create a flexible space, and create a space that complements the historic architecture. Planning. We spent several months working with an architectural firm to develop plans for the new plaza. After many thoughtful discussions, careful budgeting, and through many possible designs, our final plan was presented to the City Council for approval. Once final plans had been approved by the city, we broke ground in late 2020. This was a welcome sight during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, when we all could use some good news. The construction continued through winter and spring and was nearly finished the summer of 2021. So after countless hours spent planning, nearly 20,000 in-kind contributions from the city, and 357,000 in funds from the Friends, Faribault's front porch was open. In August 2021, we invited the community to join us to celebrate the opening of the new plaza with music and food trucks. The plaza was well received by all who attended. This is the plaza today. The first phase of the plaza is complete, and the reception from the community has been incredible. It has become a great place to read peacefully, have outdoor meetings, play a game of checkers or chess at one of our game tables, or have a picnic. It also provided a stage for a musical performance during our community's recent 19-night gathering at the library. So what's next? We aren't done yet. The next phase includes adding planters to help delineate where the social steps are, as well as add some color and flowers to the plaza. We will also be adding shade structures to keep the area comfortable during the hot Minnesota summers. We plan to present the work we have done and our plans for the future to local groups to help garner more community support for the plaza and grow meaningful partnerships with other community organizations as we work to continue to improve this space. So from the planning stages through groundbreaking to the construction and celebration, the Friends have benefited from these amazing partnerships, and we are so grateful for all they have done to make Faribault's front porch a reality. The Buckham Memorial Library staff and patrons, the City of Faribault, our Faribault City Council, the Historic Preservation District contractors, Faribault Daily News, as well as our local access TV station. Thank you for considering Faribault's front porch for the Evie Nordley Award. We are truly grateful for being considered.
Thank you, Stephanie. Last but not least, we're going to hear from Mary Jo Wimmer on behalf of Grand Rapids Area Friends of the Library, who some of you may remember as winners of the 2019 Evie Nordley Award for their dynamic pop-up book sale model. As of today, Grand Rapids is home to more than a dozen assisted living complexes, dementia care units, and other senior housing options. Itasca County residents feel fortunate that they can secure elder care in the same community most have called home for decades. Not all towns are so lucky. Obviously, though, there's more to quality of life than a place to live. And Grand Rapids area library staff have identified this growing senior population as an underserved subset of the community. In their ongoing effort to help the library close the gap between seniors' needs and library services, the local Friends recently invested in a dozen specially crafted memory kits. Memory kits are not an altogether new concept for libraries. As the name suggests, each is a loanable activity pack designed to spark memories and mutually enriching conversations between people experiencing dementia and their loved ones. Let's hear from Mary Jo on how Grand Rapids made the concept their own.
Hello, I'm Mary Jo Wimmer with the Grand Rapids Area Friends of the Library. This last year plus, we have taken a little road trip with a decision we made to make some take-home memory kits. Our journey was a long one where we visited many places and spoke to many people and learned a great deal about our proposed project. And the question that we wanted to answer was, what quality service could the Grand Rapids Area Friends of the Library offer to people? Because it seemed to us that there were people in our community who could not access the library for whatever reason, because maybe they were homebound in a nursing home, had a traumatic brain injury, whatever the situation was, they were unable to access our library. So on our journey, we spoke with qualified staff at nursing homes, families of Alzheimer's patients, activity directors at nursing homes, Elder Circle and their daycare program, and many others about our ideas, gathering information about the best approach to use in reaching this unreached population. We decided in the end to create 8 memory kits. In fact, we started with 7, and then we had a request for an 8th one. So they are here. We have one called My Pets. We have one called On the Farm that deals with agriculture. We have A Mother's Love that has a lot of things you might remember from your kitchen growing up in it. We have At the Movies, Nature, which includes a fishing pole, a gardening one, War and Remembrance. And then the one we were requested to make was making music. So we have that one in production right now. Each kit lists the contents of the kit, has a photograph of the contents of the kit, and directions on using the kit and the replacement costs of each item. The reason for the list and the photograph is to make it easy for the caregiver to make sure they have everything back in the kit before they return it to the library. And they're allowed to check these out for a month at a time. So the way it happens is somebody will come in, it might be an activities director, it might be a loved one who's going to visit someone in a nursing home or somebody who's ill at home, and they take the kit with them. Sometimes we believe that there may be a person who receives a kit and just falls in love with one item. Let's say there's a doll in there or a stuffed animal that they just have to keep. And that's why we include the replacement items for each replacement cost for each item. So that if people decide, you know, my mom really wants to keep this, they have that option and we'll just replace the item. When the kits are returned to the library, Friends of the Library volunteers go through them, clean each item, make sure the kit is complete before it is returned to circulation. In each kit is a list of suggested ways to engage the person around articles in the kit. So for example, in the My Pets kit, there's a bird puzzle. Here are some of the questions that are included on this card. What are some of your favorite birds? Do you enjoy feeding birds? What do you feed them? Do you have any good stories about birds? And you can see how these questions are designed to help engage the person around the item in the bag. So, you know, we really are, the purpose here is to build relationships and to help people remember things that have happened in the past and begin talking about some of those things. Here are some pictures of items that we have in our various kits. As you see, the one on music, this is a little puzzle that actually makes music when you pull each item out. So when you pull the piano out, it makes a piano sound. The Farm Memories painting kit is a paint with water kit that is reusable. And so after a few minutes, the paint colors disappear on the paper and it can be reused. The baking cupboard is articles that are magnetic and can be taken off and played with and returned. On the far right, in the upper corner, is a fidget quilt. And we have several of those that were made by local sewers. On the bottom left is the classic vehicles painting kit. The middle on the bottom is another fidget quilt that was made. The next one is Remember When picture puzzles. And the last one on the bottom is our dog Fidget. So he opens up and there's a fidget quilt inside of him. Very plush and cozy. So who benefits from this? Well, first of all, veterans who may be struggling with some issues. This is a good thing for people to visit with a veteran. You know, sometimes when you go visit someone in a nursing home or a hospital or a care center, you don't know what to say. And I think these kits really help with that, with having something you can talk about together. Hospice patients, post-surgical or other patients healing at home, and of course, nursing home residents. Our supporters have been the Grand Rapids Rotarians, the North Star Women's Group, the Itasca County Historical Society, and Elder Circle. And we believe this has been a great success in our community. The first week the kits were in circulation, all 7 were taken out within the first week. We did have a volunteer go to all of the care homes and facilities with a sample kit and talk to their activities directors so that they would know what this is about. And we also had an article in the paper about it. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Anne, Stephanie, and Mary Jo for sharing their stories. Now, the moment of truth. Second place and a $500 prize goes to Friends of the Ramsey County Libraries. Congratulations. Here's a fun fact about your runner-up. This is not their first Evie Nordley showing. They won top prize in 2012 for their estate planning campaign, Become the Next Andrew Carnegie, and placed second in 2015 for their Great Gatsby Gala fundraiser. Both projects stand the test of time. Visit the Evie Nordley page on MALF's website for a long recap on these and other stellar projects. Our winner and the recipient of $1,000 and a custom plaque is Friends of the Buckham Memorial Library. Congratulations. Here's a fun fact about their library for anyone who gets the opportunity to visit. The Great Hall is adorned with 4 turn-of-the-century murals depicting the great city-states of Athens, Sparta, Olympia, and Delphi. Be sure to take a look if you can get yourself past that welcoming new patio space. Thanks again to Friends of the Grand Rapids Area Library, who will also be receiving a monetary prize from MALF in the next week or so. And all of our presenters today, except for me, get a personalized copy of my newest book, The Beatrice Prophecy. Before I sign off, allow me to put a bug in your ear. Applications for the next cycle of the Evie Nordley will open in January. Projects implemented anytime between January 2021 and June 2022 will be eligible for consideration. And before I leave, I would just like to say thank you to all of you, friends, libraries. It matters so much what you do. I grew up in a very small town in Central Florida called Claremont, and the public library there, the Cooper Memorial Public Library, shaped me as a human being and as a writer. And there are still times when I dream about that library and being inside it, how safe I felt and how welcome I was. So thank you, everybody, for what you do.
Thank you, Thank you to, and congratulations to all of the winners today and the recipients. Now's the time for that video tribute to our 2022 class of Standout Friends. Since this recognition program's inception in 2016, Friends of the Library groups in Minnesota have bestowed this honor on an astounding 90 volunteers. That figure exceeds our original modest expectations for the program. If you are featured as part of this next video segment, your segment along with that signed book from Kate and other goodies from Mel will be sent to you next week. Now let's roll the video. Lynette Cargill has been an active and proud member of the Friends of the Lakeville Heritage Library for many years, too many to count. While she humbly refers to herself as a worker bee, Lynette's peers will tell you that her contributions to the group's programming efforts extend well beyond setup and teardown. Lynette is one of the shaping forces behind the library's popular community read initiative, One Book, One Lakeville. She has also organized events in her own right. Standouts include a memorable Hmong Family Day at the library, where participants celebrated Hmong culture through games, storytelling, and art projects geared towards all ages. Library staff value Lynette for her astute suggestions around community partnerships and outreach tactics. And her fellow friends appreciate how she models volunteerism to younger generations. She even brings her own granddaughter to volunteer at library events.
Diane Dirkspager joined the Friends of Ramsey County Libraries in 1990 and served on the board of directors for a full 15 years. Her contributions to the group's work are almost too many to name. For years, she coordinated a popular author luncheon series, seeing to everything from registration to menu planning to handcrafting beautiful table centerpieces. She also piloted a school partnership that brought Maplewood Elementary students to the library for a tour and their first library card. That effort garnered an award from the American Library Association in 1994. Field trips of this sort are now commonplace, but Diane was a true trailblazer. Her peers have come to expect this level of creativity. Other trend-setting ideas from the mind of Diane Dirkspager include an antique appraisal event sponsored by the Friends. Even after rotating off of the Friends board, Diane has contributed to the Friends mission in ways that few others could. For example, she played a pivotal role in the 2006-2007 capital campaign that raised more than $113,000 towards renovation of the Maplewood Public Library.
When it comes to Friends of the Library book sale, the Friends of the Douglas County Library punch well above their weight class. Alexandria's annual extravaganza has been a community highlight for nearly 40 years. When the sale outgrew the library, organizers shifted operations to the local National Guard Armory. This past August, the sale moved to an even bigger venue, the Runestone Community Center. Before the doors opened, Bob Dockin and many of the other Friends of the Library volunteers haul the books from storage to the Runestone Community Center to be unpacked and displayed on more than 120 different tables. Bob's role is not confined to the week of the event. He delivers empty boxes to the library every month and stages the room for the Friends' monthly book sorting parties. He also takes the time every month to take the new shipment of sorted boxes to storage. After the book sale and the auction dies down, he also finds a home for any unsold inventory so the group can start afresh after every book sale. This is why we recognize Bob Dokken as Douglas County Library Standout Friend Recipient for 2022.
Tarek Kamel has chaired the board of the Casson Public Library for 9 years. While that tenure is impressive enough on its face, it is doubly so when one considers what a transformative period the past decade has been for Casson. 6 years ago, the community constructed a brand new library, one that is unlike any other in Minnesota. Its design is centered around a monolithic concrete dome. In a town with fewer than 7,000 residents, public construction on this scale requires public-private partnerships. Tarek was active behind the scenes with both ends of the public-private equation. In addition to his more formal role on the library board, Tarek is an enthusiast of and proponent for graphic novels. Visitors will find the Casson Public Library well stocked in that department, courtesy of Tarek. If so inclined, odds are good that you can find an opportunity to thank him in person. He regularly volunteers at summer reading events, Christmas programs, and other happenings at the newly revitalized Casson Public Library.
Sue Keller of Park Rapids may be Hubbard County's most seasoned traveler. By the end of this year, when she returns from a sojourn to Australia, she will have visited each continent at least once. In between her globe trekking adventures, she is so committed to the Friends of the Park Rapids Area Library that it may as well be her full-time job. In support of the group's book sales, Sue attends weekly sorting sessions, researches the value of old and rare titles, and designs attention-grabbing posters. Thanks to the spirited efforts of Sue and a few other die-hard volunteers like her, this community of 4,000 is able to maintain not annual or biannual, but quarterly Friends book sales. Sue is also an avid quilter and an enthusiastic member of the Park Rapids Quilting Group. She merges her passions by selling raffle tickets for quilt prizes with proceeds benefiting the Park Rapids Area Library. Congratulations, Sue.
Abbott, Minnesota sits at the edge of the Iron Range and is home to just 1,400 souls. In a community this size, a passionate and well-positioned volunteer can touch almost everyone in town. Friends of the Library member Beth Morgan is proof that this is so. For the past 7 years, Beth has led the library's popular summer reading program. As other friends involved in these programs can attest, this is no nominal leadership role. Since 2016, Beth has led more than 70 storytime and activity sessions for kids of all ages. While she is now a seasoned leader, she still devotes prep time to each and every program as if it were her first. It is a labor of love that doesn't go unnoticed. Beth's personal motto, "You can learn it at the library," is now a saying all across Babbitt.
It seems like there's always something new cooking at the Cook Public Library. Staff credit much of that creative energy to multi-talented, multitasker Kathy Sacchetti. After dipping her toe into the proverbial waters as the circulation desk volunteer in 2016, Kathy joined the small but mighty Friends of the Library. In the years since, she has worn the hats of secretary, treasurer, and president. The Cook Public Library closed for over a year during the pandemic, and staff pivoted to provide curbside pickup and outdoor activities. During this time, Kathy's leadership skills shined as she conducted Friends meetings online and outdoors, and wrote grants to help the Friends who were unable to hold annual fundraisers. Although Kathy's professional background is in education, not development work, her surprising aptitude for grant writing has been a boon for the Friends coffers. Patrons know Kathy best as one of the faces behind the library's summer reading program, the elementary school book club, and an always cheerful circulation desk volunteer. Last, if you ever visit the Cook Public Library, look up. The moose-themed barn quilt hanging above the library entrance was handmade by Kathy Sacchetti.
From their impressive level of activity, one would never guess that the Friends of the Blue Earth Community Library is among the newest Friends groups in Minnesota. Founding member Nelda Turner is a big part of the reason this is so. Since the group's inception in 2015, Nelda has applied for and received several Thrivent Action grants to bankroll popular programs like an annual Valentine's Day tea. She is also the steward of a large photo archive bequeathed to the Friends from not one, but 8 area photo studios. This previously unsorted but invaluable cache of materials chronicles the history of Faribault County. Last but not least, Nelda is an essential part of Blue Earth's semi-annual used book sales. From what her colleagues say, we'd venture that few volunteers anywhere in the state have clocked as many hours hauling, sorting, and shelving books as Nelda Turner.
The Rochester Public Library is one of only a handful of libraries in the state of Minnesota that has a year-round brick and mortar bookstore. Not surprisingly, this fixture of our downtown library had to shut its doors during the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020. That closure lasted longer than anyone expected, in part because our long-serving bookstore manager retired the following May. With the void in leadership, and not to mention the loss of Friends revenue, our board member, Dee Voldal, stepped up to the plate. Instead of simply stepping into her predecessor's shoes, Dee made the strategic decision to first evaluate best practices of the store's operations model. That brainstorming led to the creation of a 6-person team to replace the bookstore manager. As the saying goes, many hands make for light work, and the Rochester Friends bookstore reopened better than ever in October 2021, a full 20 months after its COVID closure. Make no mistake, it would not have happened without the ingenuity and initiative of our own Dee Voldal, Rochester's standout friend.
I hope you've been as inspired as I have this morning. Great library programs, tireless volunteers, and a fantastic speaker. Before we call it a day, I have one final update to share, and it's an exciting one. After a full year spent assessing MELF member needs, reappraising our existing digital presence, and partnering with a design firm on a complete website rebuild, MELF is pleased to announce our new and improved mnlibraryfriends.org. New features prioritized after feedback from our member base include a statewide Friends database, crowdsourced Friends event calendar for the state of Minnesota, and a comprehensive video archive. We're also doubling down on many of the features that scored high marks on our last website, including the MELF blog and the Contact Us portal. Our web developer is actively transferring this new and improved content to its permanent web address home, mnlibraryfriends.org. In the meantime, you can take our tour using the link you see on the screen. Last, be on the lookout for a follow-up email from MELF. It will include a link to video recordings of this morning's segments, which we'd love for you to share within your networks. We'll also have a survey so you can tell us what you thought of Saturday Splash and what you might like to see from future MELF programming. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.